delighted to spend this hour with all of you and to share with you this work, which is very near and dear to my heart. But before we go into it, I want to ask you, if you have access to the chat, I would love you to share with me the first word or two words that come to mind when you hear the term aging. When you hear the term aging, what's the first thing you think? Please put that in the chat so we can share with one another what your responses and reactions are. Golden adventure, wisdom, older, invisible. All right. Thank you. Those are some immediate great responses. Slowing down, scary. So in response to that scary, I want to ask the next question. What do you fear the most when you think of your own aging? And I see someone just now shared the sadness as they watch a 90-year-old parent deteriorate, and a 91-year-old forgetting things. So what do you most fear? Illness, lack of independence, unable to care for myself, losing friends, physical disability, being senile, less energy. Yeah. What do you most look forward to as you grow older, as you grow in years? What do you look forward to? Because all of those are real and true. There's also learning new things. Grandchildren, yes. Being able to relax at some point. I don't know, my line is, in my next life, I'm going to relax. Time with grandchildren. All right. More sure of myself, less care of what others think. Yay for you. Knowledge, acceptance of self, world, and place in it. Thank you, all of you who contributed to this quick little exercise, because you've really already begun to help me frame the importance of this work. So the work of saging, this is what we call it, or spiritual eldering, was really pioneered by Rabbi Zalman Schachter-Shalomi, whom we lovingly refer to as Rabbi Zalman, and who lived out his eldering years here in Boulder, Colorado. So I'm sure that some of you encountered him or are aware of who he was. When he was approaching 60, and you might know that he died just a month short of his 90th birthday. When he was approaching 60, he went on a silent retreat to prepare himself for what this next stage in life would be. He said that his Rabbis hadn't prepared him, and he wanted to be really prepared and to prepare others for what this stage in life would be. And out of that emerged the work that he called saging, or spiritual eldering. He saw it as really an opportunity, this stage in life. It was something wondrous to look forward to. And yes, all those other concerns were also true. Out of that, he developed the Spiritual Eldering Institute, and he started leading workshops all over the country, and he created exercises, and he articulated what the work was about. And he wrote the book From Aging to Saging, which hopefully some of you have encountered. It's a fabulous book. And he began to train people in facilitating this work. And I came into the orbit of this work actually before I turned 60. No, before I turned 50, I take that back. So I've been at this for about 16 years now. Before I turned 50, I took a workshop and was really excited by what this work had to offer, and saw it as a curriculum for the last third of my life, perhaps, and and trained as a facilitator and became part of the faculty of the Saging Legacy program. My co-author, Rabbi Malka Drucker, trained with us as well. And at a certain point, we went to Rabbi Zalman and said, your book is fabulous. It needs an upgrade. And he gave us his blessing, which then lay fallow for a few years. And after his death, we got together and said, now we really have to do this because we have this blessing. The blessing can't go to waste. It can't be a bracha levatala, right? And so we, we wrote the book, Embracing Wisdom, Soaring in the Second Half of Life. That is based on what Reb Zalman referred to as the sine qua non, that without which it is not. That's what that term sine qua non means. The sine qua non of spiritual eldering. He gave us a list of 10 things that spiritual eldering was meant to be. And I'm going to share those with you in a moment. But I would like to read to you just from the opening of our book about what our options are as we grow older. And so this is what we wrote. By the time you're 60, you can't ignore the flab under your arms. The death of a parent will get your attention too. The evidence is clear. You're not going to live forever. And furthermore, you're not going to stay the same until you die. So what is there to do? We suggest 4 possibilities. One is to go the way of Peter Pan and never age. Peter continues to do what he's always done in midlife and beyond. He may grow up, but he'll never grow old. He cannot imagine himself any other way and is stalwart in defending himself against aging. This is not a gender-specific difficulty. These are the people whose values remain fixed. Life experience does not change their perspectives or their responses to the world around them. They do not take full responsibility for their lives, and they depend upon their charm and wit to get by. The playboy, who just wants to have fun with whatever time remains, is another response to the question we've posed here. For this individual, life until now has been disappointing, difficult, and without joy. He or she may feel a haste to make up for lost time. Anything that will bring pleasure and ease becomes the chief meaning of this life. Cruise companies and sports car salesmen love them. That's not to say going on a cruise means you're a playboy, but just to say. The third choice tries to outrun the aging process. Like the Kumean Sibyl, they would like to be given the gift of eternal youth. Without the blessing of the gods, they'll pay for it. Plastic surgeons, personal trainers, and other purveyors of magic youth-enhancing potions depend on them. All that matters is vigor that provides an illusion that life goes on forever. While we all possess a little bit of each of these types, our experience of aging depends on which one we strive to become. The final choice is the only one that will bring wisdom and peace of mind, the path of the sage. Only the fourth choice has you turn toward the future with all its unknowns and changes that are underway and embrace aging as a great spiritual adventure. One of our respondents said something to that effect. The alternative is to back into old age, as our beloved teacher Reb Zalman would say. Choose Peter Pan, the playboy, or the Sibyl, and guess what? You're going to wake up one day, if you're lucky, and discover that you're an old person. Whatever you decide will shape the last third of life. And so we suggest in this book, and as Reb Zalman suggested, that there is a spiritual practice, a practice of growing older and transforming aging to saging, becoming the wise, developing your wisdom and becoming the wise elder. And so how do we do that? How does Reb Zalman suggest that we do that? He suggests, Reb Zalman gave us a list of 10 things that are the guide for this work. The first one is to take hold of the willingness to deal with life completion and to overcome the desire to stay in denial of aging. And so that's the first step. We call it letting go, right? Letting go of the fact that we could stay young forever, that we can ignore our aging, and really taking hold of the willingness to deal with life completion. And the second is to come to terms with one's mortality. So what does that mean? We are mortal. We all have an expiry date, which is unknown, but life is finite. And we can expend so much energy pushing that reality away, ignoring it away, and not dealing with it. And when we come to terms with our mortality and we take care of the business of life completion, we free up all that energy that we've been expending up until now in denial of aging and of mortality to really appreciate and enjoy and live joyfully the life that we still have left to live. So these first two are critical. And once we've done that, we acquire the tools for working on the inside, the inner work, learning journal work, meditation, imaginal exercises, and spiritual intimacy, which is creating safe space and sacred space in dyads. So we say that one does the spiritual eldering work with a spiritual buddy, a spirit buddy, right? You always work with one other person who is your witness, your cheerleader, your supporter, and who shares with you intimately their own aging work, their own eldering work, as you share with them so that it's safe. And we use a lot of journaling and imaginal exercises to grow into these saging years. The fourth is to pay attention to body, feelings, mind, and spirit, and to be guided by them, and to maintain them in the right tone, mood, and attitude. So we want to pay attention to all of what is going on. Yes, our body is getting older. It doesn't look like it did 10, 15, 20 years ago, and it won't ever again, even when we stay in really good shape. When I started working out with a personal trainer about 6 or 7 years ago, and he asked me what my goals were, one of them I said was to lose my Hadassah wings, which was what I learned. You know, all the Hadassah ladies when I was a little girl had these wonderful, you know, that stuff under our arms that we can't ignore any longer. So as young people, we referred to those as Hadassah wings. He said to me, girl, you're not going to lose them. We can, you know, get you a little bit more toned up and strong, but those things are just part of the joy of being an older woman. So we have to notice and love the fact that, and also pay attention to what our body's needs are. I started working out because I wanted to stay fit, not to have the beautiful body of my 30s, but to simply stay fit and to keep my balance intact and to work on those things that as I grow older, I'm more vulnerable, you know, to break or to pull or to lose that capacity. And our feelings, our emotions, are, you know, and to keep our mind active and engaged and to stay in relationship with spirit, whatever that means to you. The fifth, he said, is to give a real hearing to the inner voices, allowing the minorities within the whole person their witness. So we have a lot of inner voices. We have voices we've internalized, like the second grade teacher who said, don't sing too loud because you can't carry a tune. And so now you're in your 70s and you never sing out loud because you were told you couldn't carry a tune. Forget that. Belt it out. Enjoy it, right? We have those other voices that said, I can't become a professional musician because can you make a living doing that? So I have to go to college and get a degree and be a CPA, right? Now as an elder, I want to listen to that voice again that says, I really want to be a musician, or I really want to be an artist, or I always wanted to do X, Y, or Z, and I couldn't do those things because those voices said, you have to be responsible, you have to take care of your family, you have to get your ducks in a row. So now we want to pay attention to those minority voices and reclaim what Rabbi Zalman called the unlived life, the stuff we didn't do. We have that opportunity as a sage to reclaim those, or to discover ways that we've already been living those things that we thought that we weren't living. And then we have to begin to do life repair. This is number 6. In health and practical matters, we take care of our wills and our testaments. In our relationships, to do the repair between generations, with ourselves and the younger generation, with ourselves and the elders. Reaching into our past to offer release and healing. So we do a lot of, that's where we use our imaginal exercise work to go into the past and to heal the younger self, the wounds of our earlier lives, or our relationships with those who are no longer in this world. Doing the forgiveness work with release from vindictiveness and anger, and finding the pearls in the anxious memories. So we have all kinds of exercises that we engage with to bring those things forward and to attend to them. Recontextualizing is such an important skill that we learn when we begin to do our life completion work, our life review, and our life repair. We look at those old memories, those anxious memories, and now we see them through a wider lens of a longer life that we've lived, and we can actually repair these things by recontextualizing them. That job that you lost when you were, in your 20s, and you've always carried that memory with maybe a little bit of shame or blame of the person who fired you and didn't understand you, or regret, or whatever it is. And now you look back on that and you see, wow, if I hadn't lost that job, I wouldn't have taken that next one, which actually took me on a different trajectory in my life and brought me to who I am today. Right? So I no longer have to think of that, remember that moment in isolation and feel the shame or the regret or the anger and the vindictiveness. Instead, I can say thank you to that moment, because look at what that led me to, right? That's just an example. And then number 7 is to do the philosophical homework, raising questions about the purpose and the meaning of our lives, and answering the question, where do I fit in? So we now want to see, what do people think of me? What do I think of myself? How do I understand myself? And what has been the purpose of my life? Where do I find meaning in the things I've already accomplished and that which I yet want to do? And where do I fit in as an elder now, or as a person growing older? Where do I fit in this world? And so one of those, Reb Zalman would say, is number 8, to serve as an elder to others, to be a guide, a mentor, an agent of healing and reconciliation. As we grow older, we have a longer view. We can see more sides of things. We can be more forgiving and more patient with the unfolding of life, and help others in that way. And we can serve as elders to the planet, to the nation, to our family, by being the wisdom keeper. That is something that he wanted to reclaim from our indigenous past that we had lost. In this culture, the youth culture, and everything is beautiful if it's younger and newer, and whether it's our car or our body or whatever it is, that there's a beauty to that elder and the lines on the face, which are really the map of a life well lived. And so how do we serve in that role? And number 9 is to prepare for serene death and afterlife, furnishing solitude with spirit and with God, right? For those of us who have a faith, and for those who see it all as, just the mystery of creation, to really be able to lean into that and to be prepared. And finally, he said, we do all of this nobly in connection with the Atik Yomin, the Ancient of Days, which is the inner actualized self, already realized, individuated, and completed. All of us are born into this life. All of us are born into this life with that spark that connects us to our divine source. There's a part of us that is fully actualized, that has deep wisdom, and we learn in the saging work to access that place deep inside of ourselves, to go there for guidance and for blessing, to be blessed and to be loved as we are. So these are the elements of the spiritual eldering work. And in the book that we've produced, we have 10 chapters that take you through those 10 sine qua non with exercises, with a description of what that is and some ideas of what we saw as we were growing older, Malka and I, and the exercises that accompany that. And we recommend that you do this in community or with one other person and engage in the work. It's kind of a self-guided way to enter into the spiritual eldering work. But I would like to take your questions. I'd like to hear what are your questions? What are the things that you wonder about in growing older? And what do you already know, perhaps, that you can share with us about the wisdom of an elder?
A big part of growing older is a process of realization or actualization. Um, you know, you talked about what parents can say to kids, what certain things that you can internalize that can have life lasting effects, and how it's important maybe not to hold on to those types of comments, and to really look internally for those types of things to guide you. I think it was Spike Lee maybe who said that parents are the greatest squasher of dreams than anyone, which I think is a big sadness, that people in general should want to build others up. And if someone says, this is what I want to do with my life, I think we should encourage that. Encourage collective creativity, encourage collective contribution to the world. And the process I see is that we have this infinite or boundless potential when we're young. As we get older, we either actualize that or nothing necessarily comes of that. So I think an important piece of growing older is this process of becoming, of actualizing who you are. And it's something that we hold and we know, I think, from a very young age. We have a sense of self. And so as we grow older, I think an important thing for us to keep with us is to stay true to that feeling that we had, and work toward that process of actualization.
Thank you. So true. And in fact, that when we listen to those inner voices that I talked about, then we rediscover some of our youthful exuberance and sense of who we are, at the same time that we also are really transformed as we grow older. We do transform. And one of the responses to my question before about, what do you fear, is invisibility, or maybe it was even what do you think of when you hear aging. A lot of elders feel increasingly invisible as they grow older. And that's true in this culture, sadly. Not so true in indigenous cultures, for sure, that really honor and recognize the wisdom of the elder. But when we do the saging work, when we engage in this work of spiritual eldering and we reclaim those parts of ourselves, then we also become, there were so many responses here about time with grandchildren, we can become those grandparents that encourage the child to hold on to those dreams, to hold on to that sense of self, that celebrate the sense of self that the child is able to show. So as we do our work, we become mentors to the younger generation and hopefully don't live into that Spike Lee quote, right? As an educator for so many years, actually my judgment was that our school system does that to children, right? By making them fit into certain boxes and behave in a certain way and grow in a lockstep way. And, but also that very clear thing that happens when a child tells us shares something wondrous that they know to be true. And we tap them on the head and tell them they have a great imagination, right? And so what we're doing is telling them that their truth now is make-believe, and tapping them on their head, we're sort of, we're occluding, we're covering up their access to that great mystery. So we do that. And now we are the elders or those growing older who have to reclaim this, who want to rediscover who we've always been and also love who we are becoming. So I see a private question that was sent to me about, can I give an example from my own life of a moment when I thought it was a terrible loss, that later I went back to a person who was part of that loss and said, thank you. That was one of the best things you could have done for me. So I can tell you that one of the imaginal exercises that we do in the spiritual eldering work is called a testimonial dinner to my severe teachers. Rabbi Zalman based it on the line in the 23rd Psalm, you prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. And so he has us in our imagination set a banquet for those people who have been our severe teachers, for those people who we learned something or we grew through a very difficult moment and encounter. And we bring them to that banquet and we raise a toast and we tell them what they did and we thank them for the outcome, right? So I have done this exercise many, many times with many different severe teachers in my lifetime. And one of them that I discovered early on was, interestingly, when I was a young Jewish educator in my 20s, the rabbi that I worked with was a really demanding, very powerful male rabbi who terrified me. He just terrified me because he was so demanding and he seemed to be so perfect. You know, he was that perfect persona. The rabbis of that generation, it's a while ago. We don't have them around anymore. We're much more human, we rabbis today. But that persona that stood on a bima that was 12 feet above the rest of the congregation, and you know, you couldn't approach them. And I discovered in that testimonial dinner what he gave me. And that as terrified as I was, I came away from those years of working with this person really determined to be a very different kind of elder, guide, mentor, so that even in my 30s and 40s, long before I was an elder per se, I worked with people in a very different way and I guided people very differently than he did. So it was kind of a backhanded lesson. But I was able to experience the gift that I received and to frame it in a positive way and to share it not with him because he's no longer alive, but with his son whom I knew. And to really come back and say, I got a really great gift from the terror of my younger self, I learned something about the wisdom of how we guide young people with whom we work. And I didn't have to say anything else. So that's one example. But for the most part, a lot of times as an elder, when we discover those severe teachers, or we discover the gifts that were given to us, those people are no longer around. So we have to do it in this imaginal way. I hope I answered your question. Any other questions or thoughts or examples from your own life that you want to share?
I'm just interested that you mentioned afterlife.
Yes.
I don't know if all of us think there is such a thing or know what that might be.
Right, right. And so when we talk about afterlife in this context, it's not a specific, like we go to heaven and there are mansions there and we each get one and, those kinds of things. But really, what is it that we look forward to that can help us approach death with serenity? So Reb Zalman, for example, referred to what would be after he died as his next deployment. He didn't have a specific image of what the afterlife is. What he did believe was that something of him would live on. Some part of himself would go on. And what would be his next deployment was a question that he asked with curiosity, so that his preparation for the end of life was fueled by that curiosity. What will it be, this next thing, right? So it didn't have to be a specific belief in or idea of an afterlife. And it helps us to have some kind of, whether it's curiosity or a sense of what is, it helps us to cultivate that so that we can let go of life when that time comes with serenity.
It's just, you have to convince yourself there is such a thing as afterlife. I mean, I certainly believe your legacy on earth, that's very clear, what you've done on earth and who you've interacted with and what you've literally left. But
Yes.
It's kind of, it's nice if you can believe in an afterlife. It would be helpful to think about that.
Yes, it's very helpful. So we teach a workshop, my husband and I, that is titled Death as Homecoming, Life is the Answer. And Death as Homecoming comes from, it's the title of a monograph that Abraham Joshua Heschel of blessed memory wrote back in the 60s about the meaning of death in the Jewish tradition. And he called it a homecoming. And we say life is the answer, because once you've acknowledged that you're mortal, as I said before, and that you will die someday, and you take care of the things you need to take care of in order to be prepared for that time, that releases all that energy to just live your life fully at this present moment. But in that workshop, we do address the Kabbalistic view of afterlife, what the Kabbalah has to say about what happens to the soul, and that the soul is some kind of an eternal energy that is ongoing. And in Kabbalah, there's also a belief in the reincarnation of souls. And again, nothing so specific as we see in some of the Eastern traditions, because, we have many Jewish opinions. And so there's a lot of different suggestions, thoughts, examples of what that might be. And still, it helps to explore those possibilities and imagine that some of that may be true. when you realize that so many religious traditions have a lot of the same kinds of ideas, particularly in the mystical traditions of the different religions. They have a lot of things that sound a lot like what we have in our Kabbalah. So you might say, there must be some element of truth to this. If we've all sort of accessed that same response. And when we can begin to imagine that and cultivate some, at least curiosity about it, it helps to let go. And I will agree with you also, Lori, that that's the afterlife. And so a lot of the spiritual eldering work is about naming our legacy, claiming our legacy, writing it out as a spiritual, ethical will, or mentoring the next generation or our grandchildren is a way that we leave our legacy, right? And that we create that legacy. And for many of us, that's enough to know that our legacy lives on after our physical life is over. That's enough. And so doing that work now to make sure that that has been developed as well as you can develop it. If that's what your belief is, then that's what that's to you what the afterlife is. Do the work. Do the work now and make sure that there's a good body of material that you're leaving behind, whether it's through the inspiration of mentoring others or through things that you write or the photographs that you collect with all the captions. That's also part of this work of spiritual eldering. Yes, and I just saw this comment, which I want to say is magnificent. It seems that one of the hallmarks of a positive acceptance of aging is moving from a focus on the answers in life to a focus on the questions of life. And that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Asking those questions and wondering about it and embracing the mystery, because everything that we are at this moment in time is still, it's all part of the mystery. How we got here, how we became who we are. So many, when we start to do our life review, and we do life review in the spiritual eldering work in 7-year cycles. So 7 years, 7 is a magical number in the Jewish tradition, right? And 7 days of creation, the 7-year cycles and the Shemitah, which next year will be a Shemitah year. So Reb Zalman taught us to see our life like the calendar in 7-year cycles. So the January of our life is from birth to age 7. From age 8 to 14 is the February of our life, right? And so on and so on. So each of us can find where we are in our, by counting those 7s, we can find which month of the year we're in or which season we're in, right? And those are also really beautiful images. And so we go through the through the months of the year, and we look at what were the important moments, the pearls that we remember, the people who influenced us in the January of our life, in the February of our life, right? I am presently in the October years of my life, so I'm definitely in the fall, right? And what does that mean to be in that harvest time of life? That's really what this period of life is. But I've gone back through all of those months previously, from January through September, and I've harvested what were the pearls in each of what were the important events in those months of my life, who were the people who populated, what are the places I'm still carrying some regret, shame, anger, disappointment that I want to go back and look at through the lens of now and recontextualize or do some healing. Where is there some forgiveness that needs to be offered or engaged with? And as we do that life review through those cycles, we we create quite an amazing legacy. And we discover the meaning of the life we've lived. We see the arc of meaning through our lifetime and where certain things emerge that now are such an important part of who we are or what we believe in or how we act and engage in the world. So it's a beautiful practice and process to go through to discover and claim the meaning and the purpose of the life that we're living and reclaim those unlived parts, as we said. So I'll give you an example of reclaiming the unlived life, because I said before, you know, the elder who always wanted to be an artist or a musician and now has time to develop those skills when before they had to be a CPA or a teacher or a doctor or whatever it was that they chose to become, which was also a wonderful part of their life's journey. For me, there was in the early my early adulthood, I longed to be a midwife. And for all varieties of reasons, that did not happen. I did not become a midwife. I am a labor doula, and so I've been present at many births and supported young women as they were giving birth. And now I'm an end-of-life doula. So I actually translated that to the end of life and the supporting people and their families when somebody is dying. But, you know, I always carried this notion that I never became the midwife that I wanted to be until I started doing my life review. And I realized how I have midwifed in so many other ways. I've been a program developer. I've created all kinds of programs and organizational structures and all the things that I have done professionally in my life was in a way my midwifing. I midwifed new programs into becoming. And as I said, I've worked consciously and conscientiously with younger people, always teaching them my process and my practice, or modeling that and allowing them to take it way beyond where I can see at this stage of my life. That's a midwifing those capacities in people. And so as I did this, I realized that I actually reclaimed that unlived life by recontextualizing my midwifery. So that's another way that we, you know, so I don't carry that regret or that sense of loss anymore that I really schlepped with me for a long, long time because I didn't become a midwife. So other thoughts or responses or questions that you might have for me in these last few minutes?
I understand the importance of the life review, and I like the cycles as they match to the months and to see the longevity of a life. I wonder what your thoughts are for people whose life doesn't last that long, for whatever reason. The tenure of their life is shorter than that. And then the 7 years, I think, makes sense to see the life lived as you're tracing backwards. How important do you think it is, or how often should you be doing inventory within those 7 years?
So the first one about lives that are not lived long, right? Not people who are not long-lived. For the most part, the spiritual eldering work is not speaking to people whose lives are cut short in their 20s, 30s, 40s, right? Because spiritual eldering work is speaking to those who are eldering, who are living into elderhood. Though I've always said you're never too young to start your spiritual eldering. You're never too young to start your saging. And I've had people in saging workshops in their 20s and 30s who see this as a great curriculum for life unfolding. So it's great that you're asking the question right now, because you know, your memory is a whole lot fresher. When I started doing my review of my January, February, March years, you know, it was like, what else? You know, I could remember the big things, graduating, a sibling being born, but what was really going on in my life and my psyche and whatever when I was that age. So it's wonderful to be able to, you're probably in April of your life right now, I would imagine, because I know that you're in the same age range as one of my kids. And it's the springtime of your life, but you don't have that many months back that, you still have some probably much more vivid memories. And so it's great to start, because you start to harvest already as you go along. And I think, we go back to this annually. So I go back to my life review on an annual basis once I've done all of that. So as you say, I'm reevaluating while I'm in October. I'm sort of looking at how October is unfolding as I'm going along, and being informed by the work that I've been doing in the previous months of my life, right? So I think that for people who are confronting a life-limiting illness at a younger age, I would want to encourage them to do some of this life review and to do the mortality work, because their lives are being cut short. People, and I've worked with people, because I do a lot of work with those who are dying in their 20s, 30s, 40s, who are, diagnosed with a terminal illness. And we do this work to claim the meaning of the life that they've lived so far, to give them a sense of that their life has had meaning and purpose, so that they can die well. And I think we need to be doing the review on a continuous basis. Once we start it, it's an ongoing thing. I want to just point to the fact that December begins at age 78. And it ends when your life ends. So you don't, after 7 years, go back to January. Unlike, some of our kids would like to put us back in diapers as we get older, but doesn't happen that way. And Reb Zalman, in fact, had a long December. He died just before his 90th birthday. So he had quite a long December. And he engaged in a conversation with an author, Sarah Davidson, for 2 years to articulate what it was like from his inner life living in these December years. And they published a book together that's titled The December Project. So if you're approaching those years and you want to know more about what that's like and how to be in the December years, I encourage you to take a look at that book as well, The December Project by Sarah Davidson with Reb Zalman. And it's his story, and it's also very much what was alive in him at the end, as he was nearing the end of life. What were the things that really mattered? And I can tell you that the one thing that he came to as he grew through those years was, with all the forgiveness work he'd done, all the tshuva he had done, all of the interpersonal forgiveness, and what was left was self-forgiveness. There were still places where he realized he hadn't forgiven himself. And so he created an exercise that's in the back of the December Project on self-forgiveness, and which we now teach along with all the other forgiveness exercises that he taught us, because it's so primary, it's so important. How can we forgive others really and truly if we haven't forgiven ourselves? And one of the sweetest moments that I remember Reb Zalman saying was when sometimes my younger self wants to rise up and blame me, and say, old man, why didn't you do this? And why did you do that? And how could you have ever even thought this thing? He said, and then I just stand up to that younger self and I say, don't you blame, or no, my younger self stands up to me. I take it back. He said, I want to blame my younger self for doing these things, saying those things, having these attitudes. My younger self stands up to me and says, don't you blame me, old man. It's because of me that you are you. So we learn too that the mistakes we made, the attitudes we carried, the things that we did when we were younger, they all have formed the person that we are today. And we want to thank our younger self. We want to be grateful. We want to excuse with deep compassion the mistakes that we made, the things that we're a little bit ashamed of. Bring them into the light and say, yes, this is who I was, this is what I did, and look at what I've learned as a result and how I've corrected my path as a result. That's also that process that we get from the life review and recontextualizing.